Hello there, and a very warm welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I am Victor Matthias. Now, the traffic in Lagos has become a worrying situation for residents who have complained on various platforms. And this edition of the show will look at the causes, the palliative measures provided by government, and ways motorists can avoid spending long hours in traffic. But before we do that, let's take a look at the top social media trends in the past week.
The capital of Anambra State and one of the commercial hubs in Nigeria was sent into mourning after two petrol tankers exploded in Upper Iweka axis of Onitsha after falling off its lane, killing a woman and her child in the process and another, days later at the Omagba area of the city. The federal government and organized labor reached an agreement on the implementation of the new minimum wage after 3 days of talks. The meeting also increased the salaries of military and paramilitary officers, but the percentages were kept confidential. The two footballing greats returned to the trends after Lionel Messi received his 6th Golden Shoe award for topping the European soccer scoring charts for the 6th time in a decade, and Cristiano Ronaldo reaching the 700 career goal mark, playing for Portugal, Sporting Lisbon, Manchester United, Real Madrid and Juventus.
Well, there you go. Those were the trends in the past week. But joining us to look at today's topic, we have with us a resident of Lagos and also a media practitioner, Isabella Akinshaye. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we also have the co-founder of Max.ng, Chinedu Azodo. Thanks as well for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, let's begin with you. There's been so much in terms of talks now. In terms of how people move around Lagos, complaints here and there about so much traffic. What has been your experience?
I agree 100%. The traffic has really gone from bad to worse. And for me, it's surprising because we knew the rainy season was coming and we know how the floods tend to exacerbate the situation. And then you're driving your car through water, there's traffic, your car is breaking down. I mean, your sand protector is coming out, there's water rising through. So you can't take away the traffic from the flood. And then again, it just seems like there's so many cars on the road and not enough alternatives for people to get around Lagos without getting into their cars and stuck in traffic for hours on end.
So, I mean, the government says they're doing stuff, in terms of they've declared like they're trying to move people away from the roads now to the water. Do you think that will solve the problem?
I don't think so. If you think about it, the problem is not just moving on the roads, on the water is when you move from one point to the other, how do you then move from that point of, or that port of arrival to where you're actually going? And if you think about this, the idea would be to target a lot of the people who have cars. A lot of people who have cars typically are well to do or better off, right? And the incentive for them to get on a boat from one point to the next and then start trying to figure out how to go from that boat station to their office or to where they're actually going is just not strong enough for most of these people. So they will continue to be on the roads. So a key thing the government needs to look at is how do you, make the roads more efficient and help transition people from what they're doing today to what helps us be more successful over the long term.
Yeah, so because she made mention of how we know that it's the rainy season and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the governor of the state, as Sanwo-Olu was speaking not too long ago, and he talked about how since he was sworn in, there's been rains falling, and that's one of the reasons why they've not been able to take care of the potholes, which you made mention of. Because he made mention of how bitumen and rain don't mix, so to speak. Now, don't you think that's a valid point for where we are at this point in time?
Absolutely not. Lagos's transportation issues, Lagos's rains across the entire country, in fact, is not something that started today. It's a cyclical thing, right? We have enough data as a country to know, to expect when there will be rains and when there won't be rains. And it's a question of better planning and execution, right? We're talking about bitumen. Why aren't we using concrete to make these roads? You have manufacturers like Dangote and Lafarge who sell cement in this country, right? Cement roads do better with, water and rains, where bitumen doesn't. So
wouldn't that be a lot more expensive?
Maybe in the short term, yes. But over the long term, you're not repairing and repairing and repairing. So it's a question of quality over quantity. If you think about how people who do motorcycles do, for example, the higher value motorcycles might be more expensive for drivers to purchase up front, but those bikes tend to last 3 years, 5 years, 7 years for drivers versus buying smaller engine capacities that don't last over the long term.
Oh yeah, so again, the governor has declared a state of emergency, on the roads, and there's been like a social media campaign where they say, he's a point and fix governor. Doesn't that inspire some hope that, this will be taken care of very shortly?
Absolutely not, because if you look at the Oshodi Express, for a while now they've cordoned a certain part to build these barriers to prevent people from crossing the road. But then again, from Charlie Boy's bus stop all the way to probably Solo, you can't even see any flyovers. You can't see any pedestrian bridges. I beg your pardon, there's a pedestrian bridge at Antony Village. And after that, there are no pedestrian bridges. So how are people supposed to move around? So you're telling me that you're doing point and fix, but you're actually making the problem worse by putting these things, which are great because you want to save lives, but at the same time, somebody has to pay. So now I spend hours on that road because it has been cordoned off. And your point about the waterways, I think we're also not looking at the fact that it's limited. You look at the lovely...
How limited is it?
You look at, say, the lovely Bariga water jetty, and you see it from Third Mainland Bridge, and you're thinking, okay, yes, I don't have to go through this traffic. But then look at the times it operates. It operates during the day. There are people that want to leave work in the evening and use these waterways, and there are people that want to leave work or their homes very early in the morning.
Yeah, but how safe is it for people to ride on the waterways late in the night?
Victor, I want to believe like you're well-traveled, and we know places like Venice, Amsterdam, places that have waterways. We even use it as tourism. You go to Dubai now and they tell you you're going on the Doe cruise. I don't remember anybody telling me about issues of safety. So again, it's back to his point. Like, we know all these things are there. So when you're going to open this fancy Bariga jetty and you're telling people you don't have to apply Third Mainland Bridge, then why are you not giving us the timing that we can use it and will actually prevent traffic? So I think this point and kill thing, he needs to go back to the T and the E. That's transport and environment. For me, he's not delivering on that transport, that environment. He's come back.
So wouldn't you say it's too early? So to speak, now baby steps. They're just opening the waterways. They probably just had maybe about 6 boats, in conjunction with with another company. So, I mean, they're beginning. It's just starting points. Maybe perhaps
Let's
moving
even
further.
talk politics. I mean, you're beginning, but you always make a big deal about the 100 days in office where you want to show your body language. You want people to believe that, yes, you're ready. I don't know about you, but for me, he had time, and he spends a lot of time going around, granting press interviews, traveling abroad to learn from all these great schools. But what we need now are solutions. I mean, let's look at the environment. If he pays more attention to the environment, refuse is not piling up in the waterways, then we don't have as much problems again with the flooding issue. So I'm sorry, like when it was time for campaigns, he was ready with all the answers. I mean, let's look at Apapa gridlock. Where are we?
Which is, I mean, obviously like a discussion for another day. But I mean, let's look at solutions now. I mean, so one of the most popular, mode of transportation, I mean, which we've known over the years, is the Okada transport. But where are we with that now? Because for some reasons they've taken out some of the bikes now, so you need to have a specification. Don't you think that is also maybe hindering people's free movement, so to speak, from one point to the other?
So, the challenge that the specification they've set up for motorcycles in terms of engine capacity actually makes sense for a city like Lagos, right? So if you think about it, really small motorcycles, if a car zooms by and you're on a highway where most people are actually moving pretty fast, for a customer, for a driver, it's a very shaky experience and can be quite frightening for people, right? So I do think that the regulation makes sense. What I don't think makes sense is that the policy to support that regulation doesn't exist. So for example, if you look at the unions, NURTW and Co., what they collected in a city like Lagos, they collected effectively 3/4 of Lagos's IGR in 2018 as union dues, right? This is not tax. This excludes what the local governments are charging bus drivers, keke drivers, motorcycle drivers. Bus drivers are spending as much as 7,000 naira a day in dues to both unions and local governments. Motorcycle taxi guys are paying, or Okadas are paying as much as 2,000 to 5. Kekes are paying as much as 2,500, 3,000. It's absurd and unheard of that you are trying to build a city and you have effectively a militia or mafia who's just collecting money unchecked by the government, right? Now, the government has talked about putting in licenses for companies who want to, go into motorcycle taxis, keke taxis, and co. But those licenses don't preclude how these guys will function around the unions. So essentially, you're stuck in a position where the government wants to regulate and make money from this, but at the same time wants to have cronyism continue to exist, where these guys are just taking money and taking from drivers, right? That puts a lot of, drivers in a perpetual cycle of poverty, right? Lagos is a poor city. Forget that in Nigeria it's considered wealthy. Lagos and Nigeria as a whole is a poor city. The average person is producing $2 per hour per day because we spend about 6 hours a day of our lives in traffic. That's 1/4 of your life sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic. So in creating alternatives to that, you actually have to create wealth for people, so that these drivers today who maybe are renting motorcycles from one person or another, within a year or 2 years, own their own motorcycles, can work independently and can pay taxes. Because we're talking about like Lagos wants to grow the IGR and all those kind of different things. The way you bring these people into the tax net is to create consistent, clear policy around them, so there's no multiple taxation.
So you basically think that the policy should be redrawn or rewritten?
No, the policy should be rewritten, right? So bring people, companies who actually execute
or people
on this,
that play in the sector.
Exactly, to come sit down and say what makes sense and write policies that actually work, not policies that are punitive and feed people who don't add value.
Well, I mean, I wish we could go on and on, but I mean, I have to say that hopefully that policy would be written, and hopefully, of course, the governor will fix all of these roads, and we could have that free movement without traffic. I mean, I don't even think that Lagos might ever be without traffic, because even big cities that you made mention of,
But
New York,
I
Dubai,
think
they all have traffic.
what we're forgetting is the rail, because for a lot of people, that's a cheap form of transportation. So the rail, not just the roads.
So I mean, to add to that, right? Talking about rail, you're still going to have the same issues you're having with the waterways, right? Because it's expensive to make happen, and you still need to have that last mile transport that happens from the rail station to people's offices. People who drive a Lexus to work or have a driver drive them to work, are they properly incentivized to actually get on the rail and take that last mile option?
All right, I have to say thank you for joining us on the show at this point in time, Isabella Kinshaya as well as Chinedu Azudu. We'll be back in a moment. We'll take a quick break. Please stay with us.